This is Appetite for Distortion.
Time to die!
And welcome to the podcast, Appetite for Distortion. My name is Brando. Episode 48. Holy shitballs. 48. Pardon my French. Although Mitch Lafon is not a French Canadian, I don't think. My special co-host, Mitch Lafon, today. You're not a French Canadian, right?
I am not. I mean, I have a French name, and my dad was born in France, but they got divorced way before I got to know what kindergarten was. So I was raised by an Anglophone English mother. So
okay.
I am fully English, and I don't say Lafon, I say Lafon, which is sort of the bastardized English version of the name. So
I'll try not to be the American who's like, mozzarella, tries to change it. Lafon.
Mozzarella.
So, yeah,
there's no mozzarella
you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I love it. So Mitch Lafon, many of you know, is my co-host for today. Westwood One, with Chris Jericho on his network.
Stupid idiot!
Yes, Canadians, they stick together. I love how this is going to be. I'd love to interview him at one point, but this is like the second Jericho connection here on the show.
You just made the list!
Because a couple episodes ago, we interviewed Todd Kearns, and they had a Canadian cover band. Brilliant.
The Canadian band that Todd is in with Brent Fitz is called Toke or Tuke, right?
It used to be Coverboy, yes, but it's Toke now.
Yeah, well, listen, the French word that means, a hat on your head there is Tuque. So when I see T-O, I call it Toke, and that's what it is for me. But, yeah, I saw them live about a month ago, 6 weeks ago. They were phenomenal. I mean, it was absolutely brilliant. And they do all these Canadian hits from Honeymoon Suite to Rush to Trooper to, all kinds of bands that your fans are listening to going, who now? Honey what?
All these famous Canadian bands. And no, I learned a lot from Todd Kearns, but that was a couple episodes ago. And of course, I want to, mention and since Mitch, you are a co-host today, you will be officially a part of News. So part of that is to thank whoever was on the last episode, and that whoever was Tomislav from Croatia, our second fan interview that we did. And I don't know if you got a chance to listen, Mitch. I don't expect you to, because who listens to me? That's
he was talking about driving around of a war-torn country while listening to Appetite for Destruction, and it would occur to me that if you're driving through a war-torn country, you would probably want to have an appetite for non-destruction. Right?
Yeah, so his story is crazy, and we got your story a few episodes ago. So I want to, of course, in a few minutes we're going to talk to Alan Niven, get his story. So it's all about the stories surrounding Guns N' Roses, of course. And I also want to thank a fan that gave me. I put it out there. I didn't know what to call the fan interviews. The fan profiles. So I'm like, with my stupid names like Shotgun News, can I do something like that? So suggested, this is from, I'll give him credit. I will just like I will give you credit right now. This interview with with Alan Niven is all through Mitch Lafon. So thank you. Merci. Thank you. I know I'm being an asshole.
Yep.
So this was another fan that sent in this suggestion for when we do another fan interview. This is from a quote, a 38-year-old Korean dude working in insurance. So he's like, call it bad obsession. I'm like, how can I make that? How can I Brando that? Fans. You heard that, right?
I did.
So if when we interview fans, we'll have a fan obsession, more about, those shows will be all about you. Mitch, I want to get,
By the way, a show all about me sounds wonderful.
I know. And there's more about you that we don't know yet. And because you were telling us GNR stories we didn't get to cover. And since we last spoke, you had moved on again to the Jericho Network and Westwood One and Mazel Tov. Because what you've done with your podcast just gives me hope for my little podcast. So I'm very grateful and thankful to you for setting me up with this interview with Alan Niven, and of course co-hosting it with me, which you are always welcome to do, of course.
Absolutely, anytime. I love chatting music. That's my number one thing. You want to talk music anytime, anywhere, I'm here.
So thank you again for Alan, and we're going to actually ask him your questions. I'm not saying that to Mitch. I'm saying that I'm pointing to no one right now, but I'm pointing to the listeners in my mind. We're going to ask Alan your fan-submitted questions, but we actually got a few questions for Mitch before we talk to Alan. This will be part of Shotgun News, so maybe some breaking news here. We don't know. This is from, and you responded to it, this is from a Guns N' Roses fan site on Twitter, GNR Pseudo America. So I guess it's their South America fan site. And the guy wrote, weeks before the reunion announcement, Mitch said that Dave Kushner was going to be in the band. Why? Just fake news to gain followers, or was it a real option? Keep in mind before you answer, I interviewed Dave Kushner. Very grateful for that. He made no mention of that, and he seemed like he wished he was a part of the reunion. So, Mitch, fake news or not?
Not fake news.
Of course not.
and no, but let me explain. You know, when the wheels start moving on reunions or on farewell tours or on a new album or any kind of rock news, there's a million parts that come into play, and the news that comes in or the rumors you hear or the things that you hear are very fluid, and some of them are very true at the moment. Mm-hmm. And then as things develop, they change. And so when I heard that Dave was going to be invited, it was from a very trusted source. It wasn't the internet or Wikipedia or some nonsense. And so there was a suggestion that he was going to be invited. And you know, sometimes, and I'll give you an example, a very concrete example. 2014, Def Leppard went on tour with Kiss, and it was announced that Night Ranger was going to be on the bill. And Night Ranger was on the bill. If you spoke to anybody in management, they were on the bill. They were part of the same management team as Kiss at the time. And what happened is the money wasn't there, and the band decided, you know what, instead of opening for this tour and losing money, we're going to go play the summer festivals and the backyard barbecues and all that as headliners. Sure, we're not going to be playing in front of 25,000 people every night, but financially, it's going to make more sense. So you could go back and say, well, whoever said that Night Ranger was opening for Kiss, it's fake news. But it's not. And that's what happens all the time. So I don't know what happened with Kushner. Maybe his name came up in a conversation during a meeting, and whoever told me heard that and said, hey, by the way, who knows what the moving parts are. But it certainly wasn't deliberately misleading. It certainly wasn't deliberately fake, because there's no advantage for me to do that. Here's the thing. When you do this, the rock journalism thing or any journal, it's all about credibility. Right. And if 9 times out of 10 the stuff I post is false, misleading, purposefully misleading, or just a blatant lie, at some point people would just go, why am I following this guy? He's a, Right. So I'm very careful about that. And yeah, once in a while, like the Night Ranger in 2014, things change, and it doesn't change because of it's a lie. It changes because there are realities in the business. There's contracts. Sometimes contracts don't work. Now, as far as the Dave thing goes, I don't know what happened, why it didn't work out, but I do know that a trusted source mentioned it to me, and it made sense. And if the trusted source had some misinformation, or if but none of it was a deliberate attempt to mislead anybody, because it really, and when your questioner on Twitter said, is it just to get followers? No, it actually has an adverse effect if it turns out to be untrue, because people go, I can't trust him. And so I wouldn't purposefully try to harm my credibility. It makes no sense. And so, no, it wasn't fake news. It was what was the hot news at the time. It made sense. And if you go back in my Twitter history, I tweeted that out with Dave Kushner tagged on it. Look back and see his answer. So you'll see.
All right. I'll have to look into that. Interesting. So
because he didn't say, no, Mitch, you're lying. Go look at his answer and look at the wink that it sort of.
Yeah, just like how I don't think when I asked him about that, he would have lied to me. I understand certain things you can't talk about, and I tell everybody I interviewed that, including I said that to Alan. So if I don't like to twist words or anything like that. So and that's also part of the GNR shotgun news. Why do I always get that name right? I mean, I made a stupid soundbite for it.
News.
And in another recent Bumblefoot interview, that he just gets frustrated when people take his words out of context. And, I want to get him on the show at some point. I mean, he was technically my first interview ever back in Cape Cod. And so, I mean, I can understand people are a little, especially in today's American climate with the fake news and people are just jumped to conclusions. But I never even thought, for me personally, a second that Mitch would put anything out there that didn't have any sort of validity to it, and life changes. Shit just happens. So
it really does. And by the way, I spoke to Bumblefoot last year. I've done 2 interviews since then with him, but I spoke to him last year, and we got into this long discussion about why we're not talking about Guns N' Roses, why we're not going to talk about. And he said, "Listen, I've got this album," and I think at the time it was Sons of Apollo. And it's like, blah, 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 we'll do all this stuff. And then the only thing you'll see on the news is Bumblefoot said Axl this. And so he said that was frustrating. And it's funny because we did the entire interview skirting around the Guns N' Roses topic. We went in the interview talking about how there are clickbait sites. And out of all the interviews I've done with Bumblefoot, guess which one didn't get picked up by those sites?
Yeah.
The one where we didn't talk about GNR, and we both were giving our opinions about clickbait and clickbait titles and stuff, or headlines, I guess is the word for it. And so, yeah.
I get it, and we've spoken about it before. Why? I mean, he was really nice about it not coming on because it's a Guns N' Roses site, and I understand wanting to move on and. That's why with Alan, I'm going to focus on not just GNR stuff, but his life and everything. But I get it, and I would focus on other things. It really is fascinating. And right now, I'm trying to, let me see if I can get it. I found my original interview with Bumble from when I was a kid. I was in like early 20s. You probably laugh at that phrase, so I'll have to find it and play it. But I did get another question for you before we get into Alan and start asking him all these fun questions. I want to know, this is from Georgina, UK, from my GNR forum. And this could be, I don't know, it's not going to be fake news. This is just what, if you know it. Do you know anything, if you've heard about Concrete Axl DC? There's a realistic expectation of a new GNR album. So 2 questions, I guess, within that same one.
So have I heard anything official about a Guns N' Roses album? The answer is no. Have I heard people within the spider web talking about that? I have, but none of them are based on anything concrete. They just sort of, there's a lot of, a friend of a friend said that a friend of a friend saw that a friend of a friend heard. So, is it where there's smoke, there's fire, or is it just blah, blah, blah? My personal feeling, based on absolutely just knowing the business, that when you do a tour, when Kiss did the reunion tour back in '96, the next logical step would be to have new product, and a new T-shirt or new running shoes is not the right product. A new album is. So I would think that the next logical step would be a new Guns N' Roses album. Now, as for Axl DC or AC/DC, I'm trying to think if I was told or if I read it somewhere that Angus was very, very happy with Axl and the band, and that he wanted to move forward with making an album. So my own personal feelings is, yeah, I expect that there will be new product from both AC/DC featuring Axl and, of course, Guns N' Roses featuring Slash, Duff, and Axl. It just is sequentially the logical next step for both entities.
And I kind of feel the same way. It is fascinating. I'm going to see if this works right now. I'm going to see if I can play you the Bumblefoot thing.
The better of us know him as Bumblefoot.
All right, so let me start again. So this is 20-year-old Brando. My very first radio interview with Bumble. I met him at a show in Ottawa. There's your connection, your Canadian connection. Kept up with him via MySpace. I told the story about this in previous podcasts, but I hadn't played the actual audio. I wish I had the full interview, but this is just what I put on my my radio reel. So enjoy Little Brando. This is before a Chinese came out talking to Bumblefoot.
Some of you know him as Ron Tall. The better of us know him as Bumblefoot, one of the guitarists from Guns N' Roses. How you doing today?
Very good, man. How are you doing?
I have to ask the question.
About the album?
Yes, about the Chinese Democracy. I know. I wouldn't be doing my job.
I know all the DMFs are sick of hearing the word soon.
Yeah.
But you guys haven't heard that the album is done recorded.
All right, excellent. There you have it. It is going to come out. Once again, soon is the word. From what I've heard from the leaks and from what I've heard live, it's going to be well worth the wait. And Bumblefoot, I can't thank you enough for your time.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
And you're welcome back anytime. And if you want to throw in some free backstage passes to me, I won't turn them away.
Very cool.
Horribly edited and so long ago. So hopefully he comes on again.
Did you
at some
get the
point.
backstage passes? That's the important
No,
thing.
of course not. No, I'm not Mitch Lafon. So there you go. So I hope to have one day Bumblefoot on the show, and I'll ask him about everything other than GNR if he wants. I've made that offer to other guests who were a little timid. I mean, I'm glad Brain eventually came on, but I say, hey, if you just want to talk about your life growing up, I think GNR fans will still care about that. They care about you. So the invitation is always there to Bumblefoot, but forever. He popped my interview cherry.
Yes, and I will be seeing him in April in Montreal. We spoke about it, and I've offered to be his tour guide and lunch companion to take him around town. So that's supposed to happen in April when they're here with the new band, the new band.
I've heard nothing but good things. I haven't seen them live yet, Sons of Apollo, but it'll be interesting. And maybe you want to co-host an episode, or I'm sure you'll have him on Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon first. But if there's ever a right time, maybe he'll feel better about if Mitch Lafon was co-hosting an episode of the AFD show. Who knows? But that is potentially then. This is now. I have to give credit always where credit is due. I'm very lucky to have gotten some of the guests that I've had on this show. But with someone like Mitch who really has worked from the ground up and to go from, just doing YouTube stuff to eventually working with Chris Jericho.
Stupid idiot!
It just says a lot. So thank you, Mitch, for connecting me with Alan Niven and being my co-host on this episode. It means a lot. And I want to... You're always welcome whenever you want to co-host. After you wrung out the good stuff on Rock Talk, if there's any leftover stuff, if you want to put on the AFD show, feel free to come on, because I know you have a lot more GNR stories. And
I've got quite a few. I mean, there was that time in I guess 2008, 2009, Guns N' Roses came to play Quebec City, and I was hanging around backstage, and Bumblefoot and all those guys walked in and said hello to everybody. And then the captain of this police squad came in and said, no questions, look away, turn your eyes down. And I was like, what the fuck? And then somebody said, oh, Axl's walking in. And so everybody had to look away and stuff. And I'm like, come on. This is not Axl who's asked this. This is just some dude who's thinking he's, And it was just strange to see sort of reporters and everybody sort of staring at their feet while Axl walked in, and it was just like, really? And I know that that's not from Axl. I know that that's just somebody at the venue who just wanted to make some kind of show or some kind of I'm the boss here. It was weird. And of course, I was at the Olympic Stadium riots back in, what was that, August of 92, 91?
Oof.
92? I was there. That was a fun night, and I got plenty of great stories to tell from the GNR stuff. Lot of great stuff.
So that's why you're going to be a reoccurring character. You're going to be, I don't know.
I'm going to be Baba Booey. That'll be fun.
I want to give you more credit. Like, who's a good you're going to be Tom Selleck on Friends. That's you.
There you go.
You just have to grow a mustache. But in the meantime, because we know about Mitch, we're going to get to know Alan. So I believe he is calling up right now. So enough of my fluffing Mitch Lafon's ego. Time to let's talk to Alan Niven. So as Mitch and I were talking about, obviously, while you're tuning into this episode, joining us on the phone right now, Alan Niven. you may know the name. You do know the name if you're, of course, a Guns N' Roses fan. Was their manager for a crucial part of their history. Has done so much else, of course, with Great White, and worked with so many different bands. So I want to find out more about Alan. First of all, hello. Or do I say, first of all, is it offensive if I call you a Kiwi? Please, I'm an ignorant American. I don't know. Is that an offensive term, Kiwi?
No, it's definitely not offensive to call a New Zealander a Kiwi.
Okay.
Some New Zealanders might get upset if you call them Aussies.
Okay, all right. Because full disclosure, and nobody gives a shit about me, but there was this Australian girl that I was hitting on and trying to be like a jerk about it. I kept calling her a Kiwi. It did not work at all. So I want to know more about Alan and how we got there. First of all, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time.
Pleasure. There's not a hockey game until 7:55 my time.
Yes, we have to establish, because obviously, Mitch, you're home in Canada, or you have your Justin Trudeau comforter on right now, hanging out in Montreal. That's where you're hanging out?
First of all,
sorry.
No, I am not a Justin Trudeau fan, and quite frankly, he could go be your president for all I care. But no,
me and a million Americans would love that. Anyway, continue.
Oh no, you wouldn't. But but I am, yes, in the home of the winningest city of Stanley Cups, Montreal. So I think we have 24 of them that we can throw at you Rangers fans and Islanders fans.
Yeah, don't ever say you Rangers fans to me, ever. Cause I'm an Islander fan, and that's what really piqued my interest, because I've listened to, of course, Alan's interviews with Mitch, and just in addition to just being intrigued by the GNR stuff, the hockey stuff, and I've talked about it because I'm a big Islanders fan, and for some reason, I don't know why, I'm wearing a Tampa Bay Lightning hat right now. I've had this hat for like 20 years. But so I know, Alan, you're not calling from New Zealand. You're calling from Arizona, where you reside, correct?
Yeah, I live in Mountain, Arizona, about an hour and a half north of Phoenix, at about 5,000 feet. So it's not as hot as Phoenix in the summer, and we get seasons up here. We get a bit of snow. But I just want to quickly point out something before it slips away.
Sure.
While Mr. Lafon is crowing about how many times his local team have won the Stanley Cup, most of the time when they won it, I think there were, 4 or 5 other teams, and that was it. And it was basically, your turn now, round robin. Now we're in a competitive era. They're a little less guaranteed. And of course the Islanders had a splendid run there too.
Yes. I don't remember the last time, because I was born in 1983. I don't remember any good times.
Well, we know why you were born. But the thing I do find, the thing I do find interesting was that obviously over the years I've been into Nassau Coliseum a number of times, and what a shit pit of an environment that was. But I would say it was the most perfect hockey arena.
The Coliseum, the Nassau Coliseum.
Yeah, it leaked, it stank, it was rusted, it was horrible. But I can't imagine a more perfect setting for an ice hockey game.
Exactly, the barn. I know they redid it. The Islanders are going to play some games there next year. I know no one gives a shit about this. I don't think Guns N' Roses ever played the Coliseum. I've seen Lincoln Park there. I've seen Ozzy there. I saw Cypress Hill there. I don't know if GNR ever played.
I was there with Great White and Judas Priest in '84, I think.
Okay.
But these wonderful new arenas that they build today, where you have champagne served to over upholstered leather seats, just not quite hockey.
Yeah, you go to. I feel like you're going to a hotel, and there just happens to be a hockey game at some of these arenas. I haven't been to. So, are you now a Coyotes fan? Well, I grew up in them being the Phoenix Coyotes, but now they're the Arizona Coyotes.
Well, there's an obligation to connect to your local team. And interestingly enough, I moved to the desert permanently. I'd had property out here for a while, but I moved my family here permanently at the same time as the Coyotes were launched, which I felt was a sign from the universe and from God that I was making the right decision. And you're going to have to give up on the LA Kings now, but here's your new team. So yes, that's our local team. We did have a minor league team actually here in town called the Sun Dogs.
I thought you had the Roadrunners, or is that something else?
Well, the Roadrunners used to be based in Phoenix, and then they disappeared, and now they're back in Tucson, and they're actually having a good year. They're actually having a good year, but we actually had a team in Prescott Valley called the Sun Dogs, and that was a lot of fun, but it went the way of most things in this area. It's an initial interest, and then it kind of fades away, and then it fails financially. So we lost the Sun Dogs, which is a shame.
Well, I hope that sucks, because until now with the Island, and again, nobody gives a shit. I just love the fact that I'm talking about hockey with an ex-Guns N' Roses manager and a Canadian. It's I love that.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah,
and of course, the Montreal Forum was the place to see hockey. I mean, there's no denying that had the everything, the ghosts, the attitude. That's the real.
Yeah, but the other thing that I need to point out to Mitch is that the Habs are not going to win another cup until the curse of the blade is lifted. And of course, I'm talking about the fact that they pulled that stunt when they were playing the LA Kings way back when, which was actually the very first game that I took my son to, hockey game, when we got screwed over Marty Sorley's blade. And I found a photograph online of the officials measuring the blade, and every time the Habs either do not make the playoffs or fail in the playoffs, I make sure I send that picture to Mitch.
The relationship you guys have is funny.
Yeah, and of course, there will not be a Stanley Cup in Montreal in my remaining lifetime. I can sadly admit to that. It's bad.
I've heard a rumor out of the Lafon household that there's a line of overnight bags by the front door with Las Vegas labels on them. I think Mitch is starting to get to the point of thinking that maybe he should move out of the snow and move into the desert, because, who knows? We may even have a Stanley Cup in the desert this year.
That would be crazy. Yeah, it's funny when I follow Mitch Lafon on. I have to say it, Frenchie, on Twitter. I constantly see you like the Las Vegas Golden Knights tweets all the time. And they have a funny... Right. Actually, my youngest brother just came from Vegas for school, believe it or not. And I asked him to buy me a Knights shirt. So, again, nobody gives a shit. But I love this. Maybe, Alan, in the future, we can have like a sports segment with Alan and Mitch.
Do it for WOR. No, but to be fair... I've always been a fan of underdogs and new teams. I mean, I had bought Minnesota Timberwolves shirts. I had bought Jacksonville Jaguars shirts when they came in. I have a whole closet full of Columbus Blue Jackets. I bought my Vegas stuff last year when they first went on sale, before the team had a lineup, and I expected to be wearing, the loser shirt for the entire season. Who knew they'd be the number one team? So I jumped on a bandwagon before the bandwagon got rolling. So it's actually kind of funny that I expected to be rooting for the number 30 team, go, and they're leading the league. I mean, wow.
Yes, the underdog. I think that's the transition that I want to make from our... I should come up with a sounder. Sports segment with Alan Niven. No, I got to work on my everything.
Well, actually, Brandon, you got a very good segue there when you hit on the word underdog, because I think perhaps the three of us might agree that rock and roll at its best is the voice of the underdog, the voice of the disenfranchised. An underdog means of speaking power to truth, and it was certainly part of my initial appeal with GNR, was they were a bunch of junkyard dogs with the right attitude.
Yeah, and actually, you picked up on it. Actually, sometimes I shoehorn my transitions in there like too much to try to force it, but no, you picked up on it, and that actually leads me to, because I had re-listened to your interview with Mitch, and you said a lot of interesting things about GNR, and again the underdog, and maybe where they are now, and where they were when you were managing them. So we will get there, and fan questions from literally around the world. For you. But I will mention one fan specifically that I know will appreciate all the hockey talk. One of my friends who listens to every episode, I don't ask him to. I've actually told him to stop listening because I feel like he's just doing it on purpose, but he actually likes it. My friend John, he lives in D.C., huge hockey fan, went to college with him. He would laugh at everything you said about the Nassau Coliseum. So, and obviously also a huge GNR fan. But we'll get into more fan interaction later on with you. But you're the underdog I want to talk about now. So I want to know how you went from New Zealand, which I'm a dumb American. I don't know anything outside America. We don't learn social studies. I say that flippantly, sort of. You're going from New Zealand, to Guns N' Roses, to L.A., and now to Arizona, wearing your Nikolai Hobbie-Bulin jersey. So I want to know how we got there. So take us back to Little Alan.
Well, let's do it really fast because, it's not necessarily the most riveting of tales.
No, I want to see. I may disagree. Even before you continue, I want to know how, what kind of music you grew up with. I want to know what it's like being growing up in New Zealand and that person, that kid Alan, eventually rubbing elbows and working with Axl and Slash and doing all that. So.
Well, first of all, I didn't grow up in New Zealand. My parents moved from there when I was 4 years old, moved to England.
Oh, well, I'm an idiot.
So I was raised in England and went to English boarding schools, which will explain my deep and profound anti-authoritarianism. The first significant job I had was driving a van for a young company called Virgin Records. And I was with them for 5 years. Within about 6 months of being at Virgin, they started to send me abroad. They'd send me to Sweden and Norway, Germany, Switzerland. And eventually one day I went in for my end-of-year evaluation and was told that they were going to send me to America the following week. So that was a major shift in my life, in that I started coming to America regularly, and I started to understand the American infrastructure better than I knew the English infrastructure. And after I parted ways with Virgin, I retired from. In my mid-20s, I retired. I'm not even sure I was really working anyway, but. I decided that I didn't want my passion to be my occupation. I went and lived in Sweden for 2 years, and while I was there, somebody came out from LA and offered me a job. And it was one of those moments, Brandon, in life where, and excuse me if I'm about to drop an F-bomb and you've got to clean it out.
Oh, no, you can curse.
All right, because, they tend to
fuck, shit, asshole, all of that. Whatever makes Alan Niven happy, I don't care. Just don't drop N-bombs. That would just be awkward.
I had that moment of realization that I was basically fucked. Because if I didn't go and take this job in LA, I knew that I'd spend the rest of my life wondering, I wonder what would have happened if you'd gone. And I knew I had to go and find out what was going to happen. So I moved to LA and worked for a company there for a while. It was called Green World. Out of that, with the partners who owned Green World, we decided to launch a label. I'd signed a band that had come through the door that no one else would go near or touch, to our tiny little distribution net company. It was a band called Motley Crue. And obviously we got somewhere with that. And out of that, we decided to launch a label, which I called Enigma. My first signing for Enigma was actually a band called Berlin. But
Yeah, I know Berlin.
and from that, I still found my partners were not necessarily easy people to work with. So when another band came along and said, "We want you to manage us," I said, I think you're going to be more entertaining company than the people I'm with. So I stepped off and did management, despite the fact that, as I pointed out to the band, I knew nothing about it whatsoever. And their response was, "You'll learn." And obviously, had I known anything about management, I'd have probably gone back to being an accountant or something. But,
Interesting.
there you go. That's as quickly as I can get you from New Zealand to LA.
I mean, that's cool that you had no idea what management was and were able to do what you did. But did you have any idea when you're like, okay, I want to go to LA, I want to go to visit the States, like what you want to do, where they would lead you, or just the fact that this was the place where something may happen?
There was no grand scheme.
Right, that's what I'm asking. Like, if you had any sort of agenda.
The agenda was that I was enjoying my life in Sweden. It's the most rational and caring place that I've lived. In America, you're not allowed to use the word socialism. And being able to speak the English language, I find it entertaining that socialism is a dirty word, because I think the opposite, antisocial, is an even dirtier word. And Sweden was a very fine place to live. The liquor prices were outrageous, but the people were beautiful. And
we spoke to Ryan Roxy. He called us from Sweden, actually.
Yeah, but it was a rational place to live. And Los Angeles is not a rational place to live. I'd visited Los Angeles enough to know that it was a dangerous and maybe ill-advised move to move into that kind of environment. And in the months before I moved, I had this big notice board up in my kitchen in Sweden where I'd cut out newspaper clippings of every absurd piece of social behavior that they reported on, put it on the notice board, and I'd stand there with my coffee in the morning and go, "Really? You really want to go and live in this environment?" There was no particular scheme except that I wanted to get back to being involved with the creation and distribution of music again. I definitely had not planned to be involved with management. I might have had a half-assed notion, but I doubt it was serious, that maybe I might get involved on a creative level with putting music together. But it was a moment when a huge door opened. And one of the things I learned at Virgin was one of the most critical words that you can have in your vocabulary is yes. And at Virgin, promotion was from within. And my boss, Chris Stilianu, or Branson would ask me to do something, and my immediate response would be, "Sure, no problem." Then I'd walk out of the office and go, "What the fuck have I got myself into, and how the fuck am I going to deal with this?"
Yeah.
But you learned as you went, and that made it exciting. My days at Virgin were exciting days. They were interesting. And it came from the power of the word yes, and I believe fundamentally in that when a significant door opens, just say yes and step through it.
And figure it out from there. Is that something that perhaps maybe was it instilled in you from perhaps your parents growing up, or is that something you just learned just growing up like the rest of us do?
I think the confidence to do it was instilled in the very broad vein of arrogance that runs through the boarding school system and what were the upper middle classes of England, that sense of can-do. And you got to bear in mind that people like Richard Branson and Chris Stilianu were public school boys too at Virgin, and there was a very strong sense of a swaggering piracy in some respects which was almost beyond the power of the word yes. But very much that was the environment in which that was reinforced in me of take it on, see what you can do. You won't know until you try.
And that's the perfect attitude that you need to have when you're dealing with bands like Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue and Great White, because it's not like there is no rule book on how to handle, just be a manager in general. But for bands like that, I mean, your attitude, I know in the end you didn't survive to an extent, but you have to have the attitude just to tread water. Am I wrong in thinking that?
Well, yes and no. The other thing is, I don't know if you're old enough to remember terms like this.
The cat's pajamas?
No, I'm old enough to actually have been almost a part of a thing called hippies.
Come on. I wasn't born in the 60s, but I know you're funny. Go ahead.
And I like to think that part of what made me of some little use to various bands at a certain point was that I didn't approach it with a suit on. I wasn't buttoned down. It wasn't 9 to 5 to me. The occupation, the passion, was a way of life. And I still viewed rock and roll as a way of life. I mean, the rational amongst us would say, yes, rock and roll's a way of life. It's God's occupation for the unemployable.
I mean, to me, it's such an outdated thought, at this point, especially since we can get deeper if it comes up organically with other genres. I feel like other genres like hip-hop and country are stealing from rock in that culture. So rock is for everybody. I don't know why it's still in 2018 being demonized. Then if you were attracted to rock and that attitude, you had that confidence, what did you listen to growing up in the
Everything.
UK? Was it everything?
Everything.
Like, what's everything? Give me some names.
Well, we could go to Miles Davis, Chet Baker. We can go to Toots and the Maytals.
Nice.
We can go to Third World. We can go to Genesis, Mitch.
Yes.
We can go to Frank Zappa. We could, literally.
Foreigner.
Foreigner. I mean, literally everything. And England lent itself to that because England is a small island. You can get from one end to the other of it in a day. And it compares with America in this way. America is a monstrous continent. So the philosophy that drove the music industry in America was we had to get everybody to buy one record. That was the most efficient way of marketing and profiting on the generation of music, is to get everybody to buy one record. Whereas in England, where you had a small island and a small market, the idea was to get one person to buy every record. So there was an encouragement of eclecticism in England that we've never really deeply had in America. So you'd have Melody Maker and Sounds and NME, for example. And I first found out about Bob Marley by reading a very small article in Melody Maker. So I went into my local store and said, I want this record. Can you order it for me? And, there's my first Bob Marley record. It was through curiosity. And in those days, too, there was a sense of, a different sense of standard. There was a greater weight of soul and intelligence in what was being generated. I mean, 1964 to 1974 to me is the golden age of popular music.
It's hard to argue that. I mean, and just so you know that I can roll with the big boys who are older than me, I was watching the Dick Cavett show the other day, and Miles Davis was a guest. So,
wow,
there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
And of course, Alan went through his Kiss phase, putting on the makeup, right, Alan? I mean, that's my favorite phase of yours.
Don't you hate Kiss? I thought you guys have a Kiss thing.
Yeah, I mean, poor Mitch. You'd think he'd have grown out of it by now. I remember vividly the very first time I saw a Kiss cover on their first album, and I raised an eyebrow, and I thought, this looks interesting. There's guys in suits with kabuki makeup on, and immediately I thought, somebody's probably taking a leaf out of the Alice Cooper page. Let's see how well they did it. And then I played the record, and that was pretty much the last time I played a Kiss record. Mm. I mean, forgive me, guys, but I will say they're probably the most overrated American band of all time. Just run by a brilliant marketing guy. But in terms of did it satisfy my soul or my intelligence? No, and they weren't very good at satisfying my venal inclinations because their groove and lock was dreadful.
My former co-host, Scotto, loves Kiss, and I've always been kind of neutral, like the handful of songs, growing up working in radio, I don't say growing up in radio, working in radio, and the handful of songs that Kiss has that are always played, I'm like, all right, fine. But just like, I kind of tend to side more with you, Alan, on this. It's just over the years, and I've spoken about it. We talk about all bands on this show. It's just, of course, stemming from GNR. That Gene Simmons, he's just turned me off completely with things that his behavior, things that he said, especially regarding mental health. And it's just really hard for me to. I mean, I saw them once in 2002, so that's not like a prime Kiss years. But I was bored, and that's just me. And plus, Gene blocked me on Twitter because I said his hair looks like Lego hair. But that's another story. I mean, I hope to, maybe one day. I don't like saying things too negative to when I don't know them completely, and I've always been like that with Axl. That was usually my number one defense of Axl when before he seemed to have redeemed himself or seems to be on good behavior and smiling. Axl's a dick. I'm like, I don't know him. I don't know. I never met the man. So I kind of, even though Gene Simmons has pissed me off in the media, I try to be like that. Plus, I also want Brett Fitz on the show, and he's his drummer. So I don't want to completely.
Brett is fantastic, by the way, and Canadian. And just quickly on Axl, I will say that whatever happened from 80 to 2005, it's over. The last 2 years on tour, on time, at ACDC, he's just been absolutely on point and just good for him. I mean, just really good for him. I applaud the Axl of the last 2-3 years. Just fantastic. Just absolutely fantastic.
It's been shocking, and I want to get Alan's. I know you've spoken about it a little with Mitch, but not on the AFD show yet. I want to get to your thoughts on the current state, but I still want to focus on you and how you got to where you are now.
Let's not completely dispense with Kiss just yet.
Okay, no, this is your show. Go ahead.
Right. I mean, because they are the greatest American rock band. Nirvana, of course, being the most embarrassing.
Nirvana,
band, but yes.
Wait.
Go ahead.
So Alan, yeah. That's a lot to handle. So Alan, I'm more towards Alan that I believe Kiss is overrated, and if it wasn't for the gimmick, they wouldn't be as popular as they are. I mean, but
I get the impression that Gene is one of those people who you'd be very tempted to dose with acid. I think there's a part of his soul and his intellect that is buttoned down and not released, and I rather think he would be a perfect candidate for a hit of acid.
Jesus. We here at the AFD show do not condone throwing acid on people, but in a cartoony sense, it's hilarious.
No, I mean,
we're talking LSD here, not something.
Oh, I thought you meant throwing. Whatever. I'm thinking like throwing acid in his face like that. Oh,
no.
Well, that's even funnier. Yeah, maybe he needs to go on a trip. Fair enough.
Yeah.
No. Anyway,
he may need a splash of color and a bit of looseness in his consciousness at some point.
I could see that coming out, and then he'll come out with the Kiss will come out with like their Sgt. Peppers after that. And my thing is my silly, stupid reference to Kiss. I've always looked at them as the Krusty the Clown of rock. Hey! And you love them, but they sell out everything. But
at the end of the day, I think every one of us on this call would be happy to have their bank account.
Oh, of course.
To me, they've done something right.
Yeah, I mean, I can't. He seems to be happy with his life, I guess. So he doesn't give a shit what the fuck I say. So I know that. So that's why I don't try to go too deep into the bashing. It just upset me, Alan, that when he says things offhanded about mental health. In addition to talking about Guns N' Roses, because everyone in GNR has had some issues, whether it be with addiction, like the stuff that Gene said after Prince. I don't like that. So that's something I talk about with Guns N' Roses and relating mental health. So
I'm a little concerned at the moment because here in America, with recent events, there are dog whistles going off right and left about mental health being the fundamental cause of people going off and shooting other people. And that in of itself is incontrovertible. You've got to be unbalanced to go and want to shoot somebody. But I kind of step back and look at the larger picture and say, well, talk to me about the social mental health of this country that you feel you all need to have guns in the first place. And in terms of mental health, I don't think most people know that Lincoln, the president, had 2 extreme bouts of depression and often talked about hanging himself off a tree in the White House lawn. Did that make him any less significant in his contribution to his society or his contribution to history? Not enough was understood about depression.
Right.
Not enough is understood about suicidal depression.
You're absolutely right.
And I'll tell you flat out, I've had my own bouts of extreme depression post-GNR, and I'm not letting much of a cat out of the bag when I look around and go, and guess what? Everybody in GNR suffered from depression at certain points. And, of course, most people will sit there and go, well, what the fuck up? I mean, you got money in the bank, you got chicks, man, you got Jack Daniels. What can you get depressed about? Well, guess what? You get depressed about fundamental things that affect everybody. Who do you trust? Who do you believe? Self-worth issues. Is this right? Is this wrong? Do I feel connected or do I feel alienated to the people around me? And there is no college course for what we will call success. I will say that an interesting way to look at success is to describe it as a figment of an envious mind. One thing you learn about an influx of money, and especially a sudden influx of money, is that it may eradicate the problems that you're focused on at the moment, but it will present you with a completely new palette of problems to deal with, and not all of them are very pleasant. Mental health. I think everybody connected to GNR has gone through a rough period at some point or another. And I think that only speaks to the fact that, we all have a humanity. So to make comments about mental health without empathy and without understanding is, at the very least, in poor taste.
Yes, and dangerous, I think, too, because I know, Alan, we're first meeting for the first time, but I have spoken about it on the podcast. I did it at the end of my interview with Todd Kearns, but the primary time when I first really spoke about it on the air, it's a podcast, but I've been on FM, but there was never an opportunity, but it was the interview I did with Dave Kushner, and this was right after Chris Cornell, and I lost my dad the same way. Just so you know that, Alan. It was probably a year before Robin Williams. But I'm
sorry to hear that, Brandon.
Thank you. But growing up and what led me in my attraction to GNR, before I really understood, like, depression, I just thought, oh, maybe I'm being emo, I have to go to Hot Topic and then listen to my November Rain, or I know what it was. But as I got older and I've gone to therapy, I've been on medication, things of that nature, and understanding what mental health is, and it's all these, yes, the X factors, all the variables, whether you're the common man or if you're Axl Rose, there's always problems that present themselves, but there's also chemical imbalances where you don't know. Well, it's just like any body, any organ that's failing you, that needs to be corrected. There's medication. So I've always looked at Axl in that regard, where he can seem to be so calm and sweet and nice. And again, this is the older Axl in my vision or the way I saw it as just a fan on the outside. But then it all of a sudden flip and just be very angry and lash out. And I identified with that when I was struggling with my depression. So that's what, that was probably the first episode of the AFD show. Because me and my then co-host spoke about why we love Guns N' Roses, how it, to set the table before for this podcast to dedicate to them. So that's why I found myself attracted to the GNR. So maybe this is the segue for you, unless you of course add whatever you need to. There
are interesting aspects here. First of all, you got to consider that the only institution to which we're obliged in life that we do not join voluntarily is family.
Yes.
And family circumstance, family experience, family genes are the first piece of major baggage that we're obliged to learn how to carry through, the airport of our existence. There's that. I don't know if you have any credence in things like astrology. I do. I live with a remarkable woman who is the best example and definition of my comprehension of being psychic that I've ever come across. And she's a very adept reader of astrology. But if you do Axel's birth chart, you look at it, and even with my rudimentary knowledge, I look at it and go, oh my God, I wish I'd seen this back in the day. How the hell does he get through life anyway? I mean, his chart is not one I'd wish on anybody. And then again, another step is when we're talking about chemical imbalances, I've been through the same process of being prescribed chemicals. And in one way or another, I was, when I was much younger, I was a little bit of an expert at chemicals, shall we say.
Sure.
But the other thing I've come to realize, too, is that we are very much exploited by Big Pharma. And
Sure.
if you sneeze twice, there's a reason why you have to take their pill. And if you sneeze 4 times, there's a reason why you have to take their 3 pills. In other words, they shovel shit onto us when maybe that shit isn't appropriate or needed. Maybe other things are needed. Maybe there's a more holistic way of improving your state of mind. Even simple things like exercise. A major difference to me is a good relationship. If you're in a good relationship, that really helps with my state of mind.
Sure.
If I'm in a shitty relationship, or if things around me are not fun, or if I feel like I'm swimming in a goddamn shark tank, which was most of my time with GNR, I felt I was swimming in a shark tank. And I'm not referring just to the band, I'm referring to all the people around who all wanted something for some reason. Then that puts you ill at ease. So again, we have in America we have an industry, Big Pharma, who make an awful lot of profit out of selling all kinds of shit to people because it's necessary. And I am very concerned about the fact that the NRA are talking about mental health, that the president is talking about mental health, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
What are we looking at, Brandon? We're looking at neighbors peering over fences and going, oh my God, she's wearing a bikini and jumping in the pool. She must be mentally nuts. You know where this is going to go.
You're absolutely right. And I know, again, it's funny because it's not a political show, obviously, but we have dedicated, Trump, just you can't help but bring him up anyway. But especially since Axel brought up the piñata and how vocal Del James is. And so, politics still gets intertwined in our Guns N' Roses world. But you're absolutely right. Well, I agree with everything you're saying. Go ahead, Mitch.
Wait 1 minute there, Brad.
Oh, Alan. Yeah.
At its very best, there is inherently a sense of politics in the best of rock and roll. To me, when Axl wrote Civil War, I got incredibly excited at that because I thought he was going to develop from being a social politician to a social statesman, that he was going to make statements that I found worthwhile and important for people to hear through the medium of his creativity, and take it from the interpersonal to the social as well. The best rock and roll bands and the people who have inspired me have been inherently political because it's caring of everybody in the audience. It's looking at your entire audience and having a viewpoint. It's speaking truth to the powers that exploit that audience. I mean, John Lennon, Bob Dylan, Bob Marley, the best of the best. They were all political. Bob Marley was killed. Bob Marley was assassinated by the CIA. So, yes, politics is involved in Guns N' Roses.
Yes, and we spoke about last episode just the irony of it being Guns and Roses, of course. But there are a few things that you had said in there, and this also, I guess, this could lead into appropriately one of the fan questions we got for you, and it's a countryman, one of our loyal listeners, Gavin from the UK. This was on Facebook, so this actually involves both Mitch and Alan, and it's perfect in Civil War. It's like I planned this. He goes, "Hey there, I see you have Alan and Mitch coming on soon. I have a question, please." Mitch was going to ask Alan this for some time back when he interviewed him last, but he forgot. Oh, Mitch, apparently. Look at this. Fans, they they pay attention. Anyway, this is
Perhaps it's selective memory.
Perhaps. I get it. You and I, we both know anyway, we're a side podcaster conversation later. He goes, anyway, this is my question. Basically, it's about Izzy in Civil War. Civil War was recorded many months before the proper user illusion sessions started. It was completely separate from the illusion sessions. Izzy was not on the demo or the actual finished song, according to the User Illusion 2 booklet credits. I just want to know why Izzy had no involvement in the recording of that song. Seems odd, especially as it was the last song done with Adler. Yeah, I know it's a mouthful.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
If you can answer,
it's remembering the moment and remembering other people's states of mind in that situation at that time too. It's no secret that there was a sense of fragmentation in the band, and it was being played out creatively during the making of Illusions. And again, this is obviously no big surprise, and something I'm sure I've probably said too many times before. But for me, Use Your Illusions is when we started to lose the original band and become the Elton Rose band. And Izzy was not comfortable with it. Slash was not comfortable with it. But there was very much a sense in those days of whatever we have to do to get along, we'll make the minimal compromises we have to, but let's just try and keep this moving along for now. So there's material. I think Use Your Illusions, basically, somewhere in there is one really good record. I think there's material on there that could use rethinking or editing, or is not really of the essence of the Appetite for Destruction band. And yeah, I love bands to develop. I think all artists should develop. Just for me, some of that material went too far too soon. And I'm going to make a point here while it pops in my head. For the record, I had absolutely no influence on Izzy leaving the band, and it came as a shock and a surprise to me when he did. But when you compare Coma to Dust and Bones, you can see where the fragmentation is.
What makes you? It's interesting because I know that's why. Isn't that why Coma was added to the set list for Not in This Lifetime, because it's one of Slash's favorites to play, or maybe that was a different fragmentation that maybe like Izzy didn't like that song, because I'm just surprised that Coma is the example.
Coma, or and any of those long complex pieces which, Stephen had a nightmare trying to play the same way twice. That was definitely not where Izzy's consciousness was. To me, Dust and Bones is the purest moment of Izzy on that record.
Sure. Yeah, because, he's singing on it, for sure.
Well, it's the feel, it's the attitude, it's, and for me, too, and again, try and hear me clearly on this, because I'm twisting an old phrase, people mishear me sometimes. Mm-hmm. But to me, Izzy was the heart of the soul of the band. And when you start to lose a degree of Izzy's input, then that band is becoming something else. Now, it doesn't mean to say that what the band is becoming is good or bad, because it's not connecting to the fundamentals that Izzy brought to it, but it's definitely changing.
And not just for Izzy, but for you as well. So then let's just take a couple steps back to see, before we get to that specific moment, then when things were changing and starting to break off. So let's just go back to when you moved to the States, and when were there steps before you met the members of GNR? How did we get there? And I know you've spoken about this before, but not on here.
Well, it was, I went there to work for a company called Greenworld.
Right.
While I was at Greenworld, I signed a band called Motley Crue.
You say that so flippantly, too. Oh, just Motley Crue. But how do you, okay, let's start there then. How did Motley Crue even, happen?
Oh, their manager walked through the door. And I would say that we were the very last port of call on the train track that he thought he might be able to get somebody to respond. He'd been blown out of every label and sub-label in L.A., and he eventually decided he was going to drive all the way down to the South Bay and go and look at this tiny little operation called Greenworld. And Mark Wesley gave me a cassette of the material and said, go home and play this and tell me if you think we should get involved with it. And I went home, and at that point, the stereo I had at home was an old JVC boombox with a pair of Sennheiser speakers. I'd only just basically landed in California, and I was living very, very light because I didn't know how long it was going to last. And I sat there with my headphones on and went, I can only describe this record as a glorious fucking train wreck. I mean, it is not that well recorded, and it is not that well executed, but it certainly has an attitude, and it certainly has an energy. And there's one song in here that I think is as good as anything Cheap Trick have written, that song being Piece of Your Action.
Oh.
So I went into Greenworld the next day and said, fuck yes. Power of the power of the word yes again.
Yeah.
So it was Alan Kaufman coming down. It certainly wasn't me being in a club and going, oh my, they're great, I've got to sign them. The guy came down with a tape, I listened to the tape, and I went, yeah, I wanted to sign them sight unseen. When I saw them, I was a little apprehensive. The drummer was good. The guitar player was okay. The bass player couldn't play bass to save his life. And they had this absurdly over-the-top image that only Americans like Kiss can and Alice Cooper can muster up. I mean, even the most
What about Bowie? What about Bowie? Bowie's was over.
I knew Bowie was coming. There was a progression there, and let me tell you, Bowie had a pair of fucking legs.
Fair enough. Okay.
I saw him twice in the first week of his Ziggy tour, and was thoroughly confused to see him in a miniskirt. His legs were just, oh my God, how does a guy have a pair of legs like that?
Well, somewhere David Bowie is smiling at that comment. That's fucking hilarious.
After Motley Crue, I sat with the owners of Greenworld and said, make me a partner in the company. I just, I do your sales, I do your marketing. I've just handled this band. I just took them to Elektra. I just got a big check for the company that saved us from going bankrupt. I think I deserve to be considered to be a partner.
Damn right.
They turned me down.
Fuck them.
Some people like the idea of ownership more than that which, they love that which they own. It was a status thing for them. And that left me at a point where I had to say, well, then I'm leaving. And a couple of the owners did not want me to leave for obvious reasons and came up with the idea of let's start a label. So that was Enigma. And the first band I signed to Enigma was a band called Berlin, who had this stunning singer.
She's beautiful.
Terry Nunn. Just stunning. And a lot of fun, great personality, just, couldn't perform very well in those days, but she had a voice and she had an attitude, and she was a lot of fun to work with.
This is all, of course, talking about bands changing, from what they were.
Well, her manager and I scratched up, I think it was about $600 to record a song called Sex that we put on the first release, which made itself known through K-Rock. But during that period of time, there was one day I was coming into the office and my assistant said, I've got a friend who's got an album who would like to bring it in for you. I was like, absolutely. Again, yes. Tell him to come. And I'm sitting in my fishbowl of an office one day, and this magnificent white 1957 Bentley pulls up. And that gets my attention straight away. Who in Redondo Beach or Torrance has got the imagination and the class to drive one of those? And this guy gets out, he walks into my office, he puts his feet up on my desk straight away, flips me an album, and without saying hello, I am, or anything else, he said, I want you to do for me what you just did for Motley Crue. And that guy was a guy called Don Dawkins. And his record actually was technically superior to the Motley record, far better recording, better songs, and in those days he had a young and aggressive voice and vocal delivery, and it was a really good little record all the way around, so much so that I couldn't sign it. And the reason I couldn't sign it was, and Don was mortified. I called him in and I sat him down and I said, I cannot in all conscience sign you to our organization here, because you're 30 years old. And in all conscience, it would take me a year or two to get this record noticed in any way, shape, or form. You need to be signed to a label immediately. You don't need to be signed to a small label. You're 30 years old. In those days, being 30 years old to me was a big deal. I mean, that was getting on.
I get it. I know what you're saying.
Yeah. So, and I took his record to Elektra, who initially turned it down. So then I took it to Cliff and Peter at Q Prime, Bernstein and Mensch, who you might know from Metallica and Def Leppard and so on. And Cliff and Peter took him on, and then Elektra took him on. And out of that circumstance, Don and I formed a friendship, and we ended up living together. And it was he who introduced me to a band called Dante Fox, which I thought was a ridiculous name. And they became Great White. So, again, trying to get through it quickly, that's how I get to the point of getting into management with Great White and leaving Enigma. And I got them signed to EMI pretty quickly. They made a disastrous first record. And the conventional wisdom is if you make a shitty debut record, you're done forget about it. But I had a slightly different viewpoint on it. My viewpoint was, wait a minute, if you thought we were signing a year and a half ago, we're much more worthwhile now because we've been through a year and a half of learning. We've learned how to record. We've been out on the road with White Snake for a month. We've been out on the road with Judas Priest for 6 months. This is a better entity than it was a year and a half ago, but such is the way that LA thinks, you're now poison. And where I thought there would be, 7 or so labels that were interested before would offer us a deal, they were all 7 pissed off bridesmaids. And I ended up in a situation of realizing, well, if I believe in this, then I'm going to have to find a way to make a record myself. So I borrowed some money, and bit by bit we constructed a record. And lo and behold, one of the tracks on it became the Song of the Year on KLOS and got 16 weeks of heavy rotation on KMET, despite the fact it was an independent release, and neither of those stations played independent releases in those days. And that was a song called Face Today. And, of course, that brought my stock up a little bit in LA, and was probably as much out of that as anything else that Zoots was able to come from Geffen and say, are you interested in signing this band that I've just signed called Guns N' Roses? And at the time I wasn't. He came back a second time and asked me, by which time I'd done some research. And Zoots is a dear friend of mine, and I sat him down and I said, you're out of your ever-loving fucking mind. This band is going to be the end of your career. Everything I've heard about them is that they are completely off the charts with their behavior and their indulgences, and you'll never get anything done with them, and they will just be a fucking nightmare for you.
And you're saying that as someone who managed Motley Crue or worked with Motley Crue?
I didn't manage Motley Crue.
No, that's why I changed my phrasing. But knowing Motley Crue, I mean, were they more so than Motley in your eyes?
Oh, absolutely. Frank, Nicky Six, is very much of the Gene Simmons mold. Very ambitious and a very smart marketeer. Guns N' Roses were attitude unconfined. And Zoots actually came back a third time and said, look, you're right. I have been told by Rosenblatt that he's not going to record an album with this band unless they get management. I can't get anybody to manage them. At the very least, will you pretend to manage them? And I looked at Zooty and I said, Zooty, I can't pretend to do fucking anything, but I will go and talk to them and see, And it started from there, and I started to fall in love with the entity. And, Izzy and Slash I found very engaging. And the fact that they were impossible was also irresistible. From a calculating point of view, I looked at it and I went, well, I can't make the situation any worse than it is. So if I improve the situation, then people are going to consider I've got some chops. So on that side of it, it's not a bad thing to consider. On the other side, it's going to take an awful lot of time, and I've just gotten Great White re-signed, and I don't want to take anything away from my concentration on getting that to where it should be. It's a ridiculous thing to take on, and I've just had my first child, and I need to be very smart about what I'm doing, but there was something irresistible about them.
I like that. That's a quotable. So what was your first interaction officially with them? Or was it with the management? Was it with a certain specific members? It was. I love the laugh track. Love it, Mitch.
The management that they had at the time, Arnold Stiefel and Randy Phillips, were desperately trying to offload them and get away from them as fast as possible. And Zoots took me to a Troubadour show to see them play for the first time. And in the dressing room afterwards, I noticed that Duff picked up a vase of flowers that had a card in it that was an apology card from the management of not being there. And then he winged it right across the room into a waste paper basket on the other side of the room. And I took note of that, and I thought, well, that probably defines the nature of the relationship between the band and current management, and certainly shows a certain attitude in the band. The first time I really spoke to them was at Pasha Studios when they were doing demos. The demos that we later put audio, false live audio on to make Live Like a Suicide.
Mm.
And I sat in with Hans-Peter Huber, I think I remember his name as, who was the engineer who was doing the mixing, and he and I sat in and mixed that together.
What are your, because I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know we've been talking for an hour. And by the way, I also noticed when Mitch said that in his interview with you, and then it went on for like another half an hour, 45 minutes. So I know you're a true mensch, Alan, but I guess I know I don't want to keep you forever.
It's Sunday. If it were getting close to 7:55, I'd be getting antsy, and my answers would be getting short. There's no hockey for a while, so however long you want, get it while it's there.
I appreciate that. So now I'm just envisioning the Duff just throwing the vase across the room, and that scene from Airheads. He wipes his ass with his record contract. I love this guy. I just picture you being, I love this guy. I want to work with this. So that was your first introduction to Duff. I want to know about, Axl, because, and this is going to tie into, and I'm glad you are more in depth with the mental illness and how it all ties in, so we can get into deeper conversations with it. So I always I identify with Axl and whatever his persona was at the time and is now. But what was it like meeting him for the first time? Did you what were you? I know you were warned about the band, but was there any warning about him specifically that you got?
Superficially and initially, I thought he'd be the least of my problems because he presented in a very reserved and very polite manner. Whereas when I went to my first band meeting, only Izzy and Slash were there, and Izzy nodded out at the table, which left me and Slash. And Duff was a raging alcoholic, and Stephen was an alcoholic. I thought Axl was going to be the least of my problems. That the behavior and the indulgence of the others was going to be far more significant to deal with.
Then, what were some of the best memories of starting? I mean, getting past all of the, you just had your kid and the stress of it. Like, when did it, I guess, click? Be like, you know what? Maybe I do have something here, and I'm not just taking a chance. Like, I have nothing to lose if I, improve this band by 5%. I am a winner. But was there a moment where it clicked for you, perhaps at the beginning, that you can reflect on a positive moment?
I thought we made a really good record. Watching Thompson and Barbiero mix manually instead of using an automated board was magical. They were in a form of dance. It was wonderful to watch two people connect to making rock and roll in such a physical way instead of just sitting there and, programming a fader. They did everything manually, and that was tremendous. But to be perfectly honest, Brandon, once the record was made, I knew that we were going to have a nightmare of a time getting any AOR radio play. My viewpoint on this is I'm going to have to go through England, and we're going to have to go through touring. And good luck keeping this band touring. My hope was that it might, if we got lucky and if we did some good work, that we might get to a point where it may eventually go gold, that I thought it would be one of the coolest underground rock and roll bands around. I had no idea, no vision, no perception that it would become the best-selling debut rock and roll record of all time. And if anybody says that they do believe that, and I know that, God bless him, I love Zooty to death. He claims it. I think Axl claims it. No, let's be honest. Let's go back to the day and go, my God, we were wondering if we could get through a 10-week tour back then. The odds were that when we went out with the Cult, that they had come back with their tails between their legs looking for their dealers within about 10 days. I remember really clearly in the Hell House, before we went to England for the first time. And I was on one side of the room and the entire band were on the other side of the room around a really ratty, disgusting, stinking couch. And I was explaining to them what to expect in travel and circumstance when we went over there. And one of them looked at me and said, Niv, do you think we can do this? To which I replied, that's why I'm fucking here.
This sounds so much like Spinal Tap, and you're the manager just trying to get shit done. I mean, I'm sure you've had many Spinal Tap moments in your career. I can only imagine.
Actually, I resent that.
Do you?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, forgive me. I'm an asshole.
I don't think we're Spinal Tap in any way. I have seen.
I'm not saying you're Spinal Tap. I'm just saying there's certain moments, but talking with the band and the manager that are Spinal Tappy. No, you're not a Spinal. That part of the movie.
That said, Great White did get lost under the circular stage of the Royal Court Theatre in Liverpool one night.
There you go. Hey, the Sharks. I don't know. Maybe they're not the best of swimmers. They're not or they can't. They don't have the best sense of direction, I guess.
Sharks go after blood in the water. Jack Russell went after chemicals in the water.
Now, I'm sure that's not the first time you said that either. That's too funny.
Actually, that is.
Is it?
It's the first time I've said that.
Oh, well, it came off too easly, so I assumed.
Well, I'm almost awake now. I'm almost lucid. My second cup of coffee just hit.
Right on. So then we ask when the tours that they didn't know that you would come home from. I got some questions about specific tours, and if anyone remembers any of them, it's not just with you. That's why I think it's hilarious that Adler said he's coming out with a second book about what friends remember that he did that he doesn't remember. I just think that's fucking hilarious. First one I got, this is from Johan, who's on also Facebook, from Rhode Island. Ask Alan about the GNR Maiden tour. That says it all. So any memories of because I know Bruce Dickinson doesn't really like Axl, right? Or is it mutual?
Well, here was my situation. From a simple professional, pragmatic point of view, we needed to be on tour to keep the record supported, to keep Geffen focused on the record, to keep the record moving. And we'd been through the problem in Phoenix, which cost us supporting AC/DC, and David Lee Roth walked away from us. And the only person who had a tour going out at that moment was Rod Smallwood, and I called Rod up and asked him if he'd be so kind as to think about taking Guns out, and he very kindly said he would. And believe you me, most managers and bands looked at Guns N' Roses and went, yeah, we'll take those cowboys out, God knows what's going to happen. But Rod very kindly said the band could go out on tour with Maiden. And it was also a relief to me because when I had the band on a tour bus, it was easier to wrangle the cats and keep the dealers away. You knew where they were and you could keep them moving. So you had a better chance of mitigating certain destructive indulgences. But I knew we were in trouble when the very first show, I get a phone call from Izzy, and he's going, Niv, what the fuck? And I'm going, what's up, Izzy? What's happened now? He goes, we just did sound check, man, and there are all these cardboard icebergs on the stage. What the fuck is this? And at that moment, I knew we had a match made in hell, and it probably wasn't going to last long. And Axel came down with a really bad throat condition, which very fortunately didn't last very long.
I can read between the lines there. So they were not. Maybe they didn't even see Eddie. He had a problem with the icebergs. That's
He had a problem. He. My God, had he seen Eddie straight away, we probably wouldn't have got one show done.
That's crazy to me. I mean, like, I don't know. Eddie's so iconic, and I mean, I know GNR. Even now, they're not the kind of band with a lot of stage stuff. I mean, other than pyro, are they turned off to people like bands like Gwar or I'm just trying to think of bands that really do big productions. Maybe of course they may think differently now, but back then, I don't know. I just find that interesting.
There's a different form of authenticity to GNR music, and it's a little more fundamental and a little more to the point. But that left me with no tour to go on whatsoever at a critical moment in the development of the record. And there was only one tour left, and that was the Aerosmith tour. And I went to, they were fortunately on Geffen, thank God. And I went to Eddie Rosenblatt and told him that he had to deliver that tour for us, and basically bully Tim Collins into putting us on the bill, which again was, Tim Collins had just had them all go through rehab. The Aerosmith environment was incredibly clean.
Right.
There was this, none of that. And the idea of GNR being on that bill, I mean, David Geffen must have really pushed Tim Collins' arm right up between his shoulder blades.
Another question we got, and this is going along the theme of tours. Were you on the tour in '89 with the Rolling Stone shows? Because this is coming from Lelo de Sosa. I can't pronounce the name. It's at LA, whatever. It's a Twitter name. I asked your question. You'll know who you are. So he asked that.
So what is the question about?
He wants to know if you were managing when everything went down in 1989 at the Rolling Stone shows. Is there any insight in how things went down?
Oh, absolutely. We were offered the entire tour. And it might sound like a large sum of money that we were offered for opening. But from my point of view, at this point, I felt my band were a bona fide touring band and closing band in their own right at that stage. And I was not that overwhelmed with the idea that we would help Mick Jagger get richer at our expense. And Mick has always had a propensity to take the young or the new glittering act out to boost the Rolling Stones profile. Now, bear in mind that I am a dyed-in-the-wool Rolling Stones fan. I love Keith Richards with a passion. And for me, on a personal level, just to be in a position where a band I'm working with gets offered a tour, ordinarily it would have been just unimaginable, just too fantastic. Mm-hmm. But when I applied my due diligence, I didn't think it was a very good idea. And on top of that, the condition of two of the members of the band was such as I was genuinely concerned that they might not last the entire tour. And I'm not going to risk anybody's life for a tour.
Was that agreed upon then? So it was your decision to not do the entire tour, and
no, it was my decision.
Right.
And both Slash and Izzy especially were, come on, Niv, we've got to tour the Rolling Stones. And I went, no, we're not going to do it. And interestingly enough, we got another phone call from Jagger's office a little later that wanted to know if we would play 4 shows at the LA Coliseum. So again, I did a little bit of due diligence because this seemed doable. It was our hometown. I didn't have to take anybody on the road. It was only 4 shows over a period of 5 days. But I did a bit of due diligence there, and I found that holding four nights at the LA Coliseum, even for the Rolling Stones back then, was a little bit ambitious, that they could probably do 2 without much problem. But to do 4, they needed some extra sizzle. And obviously Guns N' Roses at that point were the loudest sizzle in rock and roll. So I went back and said, yeah, we'll do the 4, but it's for $1 million. And our agent, Bill Elson at the time, a very dry intellect, made the comment to me on the phone of, that's rather extravagant. We'll have to see what Mr. Jagger says. But that's what they agreed to pay the band. And the interesting thing to me was we cleared about the same amount of money as if we'd done the whole tour at what they initially offered us. So fiscally, we came out even in the end.
You didn't make any money. That's something. Like, you wouldn't think that.
Oh, getting paid $1 million for 4 shows in your own hometown. I mean, we had no buses. We only had the crew for a few days. I mean, you know, it was almost all profit. Whereas what they were going to pay us to open would have amounted that had we been able to get through the entire tour, we might have cleared $750,000.
And that's your job, obviously.
That's my job.
Yeah. So that is fascinating.
Yeah, and you know, I'll say something about Axl. And again, this is a novel observation, but it's come in the moment. This I will say about Axl. I mean, it's no secret that for some reason he detests me. And obviously, I think he was poisoned. And I obviously have an idea of who that poisoner was. But the one thing I'll say about my relationship with Axl is it's authentic. I might be the only person on the planet who wouldn't blow smoke up his ass.
You would think you would want that. I mean, that's just not what I want. And again, only what you can answer. Why do you think that is? He detests you, or the poisoning thing? Why? Because he's nowadays, how our perception is, he seems to be in a good place. You know, so it could be he was poisoned back when you were around him. So if you can just elaborate on that, if you could.
Well, I mean, it's really simple, isn't it? I don't have to mention names. I mean, Mama said if you can't say anything nice about G-Swine, don't say it. But, you know, you have to look at who took over and what their role was at the time. But what I would say is that I am genuinely awed by the workload that Axl has taken on, both in the fact that the tour lasted for 18 months and the fact that he ended up performing for over 3 hours. Nobody saw that coming. Absolutely nobody saw that coming. And you have to take your hat off to him individually for that workload. I mean, the guy's in his 50s and he's out there singing for 3 hours. I mean, you know, that kicks Pavarotti in the ass.
Yeah, I don't know. We've discussed that too. The only other person I can think of that's doing anything close to that is Springsteen, but he doesn't put the same amount of energy into the shows as Axl. And, you know, the band breaks. It's just it's different. So it is quite fascinating. I guess that leads to one of the questions that was, and maybe this is what you were alluding to, in the change of management. So this is from one of our good listeners in Ireland. This is from Mr. Mac. He goes 5 years to get GNR from clubs and bars in Wembley. Then Goldstein takes over and takes 3-4 years for it to crumble. So if you have a comment on that, if you want to comment, that was one of the questions that we got.
My only observation on that is it didn't take 3 years to crumble. It took 3 months. It was 3 months after I was gone, Izzy was gone. And in point of fact, I had to... I was actually in Switzerland at the time, and I look at my phone and I go, why is Izzy calling me? And he was telling me that he'd had enough. There'd been some major fracas and problem in Germany, and it had freaked him out entirely, and he was done with it all. And they still had their first show at Wembley coming up, and I had to talk him into going to the Wembley gig. In fact, I rented him a suite at the hotel nearest the venue, and told him, look, just tell somebody on the crew to call you when Axel's there, and then you can go down and be a part of the gig and play. But, you cannot walk away from this gig. It will have a detrimental effect, not just on the band, but on you as well. So you have to see it through, see this Wembley gig through. But he was done after that Wembley gig. And again, I'm going to reiterate this. I had no idea that Izzy was going to jump, and I had no idea that he was going to jump that fast. But for me, once Izzy was gone, that is a major, 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 major element of the band gone. And, from there on, it's just a matter of time as it all falls apart. So, well done, Doug.
Well, I hope to get Doug on the show at some point and get his version of it, of course. But, you see it. When you were there, the upswing, and there could be many variables to the downswing. So just wanted to get your viewpoint on it. Of course, a lot of questions, but I'll narrow it down just to one person to give him credit since he's a loyal listener. Garrett from Texas. He simply goes, how is Izzy? A lot of people just want to know, so are you still in contact? Do you speak with Izzy Stradln?
I haven't spoken with Izzy for a while. He did come out and visit me in Arizona a few years back. And he's been in a long-term relationship with a lovely French lady.
Ooh la la.
His obsession is surfing and mountain bikes. To my knowledge, he's still really healthy.
Good.
And hopefully he's happy. I hear indirectly from him once in a blue moon through a mutual friend, but we don't talk.
Okay, gotcha. Then this relates to just your thoughts on Izzy, I guess. This is coming from mygnrforum.com, username Stranger in This Town, but they're from Germany. Questions from everywhere. Do you think that Izzy would be up for joining? I know it's a loaded question, and of course, Izzy went on stage with Axl when it was with the Bumblefoot, and Izzy went on with Velvet Revolver. And there's just been a lot of dispute whether he would join the reunion, and the tweet that came out, it was about money, so I don't want to get there just now. But do you think that Izzy might be just up for just joining? Maybe the tour might be too much, but just to make new music again? Because it seemed like him and Axl were still friends, and him and Slash were still friends. So as someone who at least has known him for a while, yes, you're not Snapchatting him every day and everything, but do you foresee anything in the future with Izzy and this band? Or Guns N' Roses, I should say.
It's a hypothetical speculation.
Oh, of course. It's just your viewpoint while I have you on. And again, you can say, hey, I don't have an opinion on it. It is he just surfs and that's his life. I have no idea.
My hypothetical speculation is that moment came and went, and they should have involved him in the last tour. And I would think that Izzy is pretty angry that he wasn't treated with equality and wasn't a part of this tour. He did get as far as flying out and doing a sound check, and then he left after the sound check. He didn't want to have anything to do with it.
When was that?
Last year. It was somewhere out in the Midwest somewhere when they were doing the stadiums, and
So just like a random show like Adler, it may have been Izzy. Oh,
Yeah, and obviously had it gone well and everybody been happy, and had there been a little bit of brotherhood, I'm sure he would have stayed with it. But something must have really upset him, because he left after the sound check and never turned up for another one or an appearance. And I would think that right now he's probably a little pissed off.
I can understand that. Another question, this is also from mygnrforum.com, from Greece, username Blackstar. You're quoted in Mick Wall's book as saying Erin Everly and Megan, Slash's girlfriend, for those who don't know, had a big part in bringing Axl and Slash back together. So can you tell us more about that story? Is that actually information or just an opinion of yours?
It's not an opinion. It was a piece of information that I was given.
Okay. So, I mean, Megan following. Go ahead.
And that doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me that the girls were able to put a little bit of oil on the water and bring Slash and Axe together. That doesn't surprise me at all.
This goes into the relationship things that we were talking about. The relationships that you've had and what Izzy has now, and how that helps you with mental health. And that seemed, a lot of people were saying, and I've never met Slash. I don't know Perla. The only connection I have, I was lucky enough to interview his 15-year-old kid in London, so I don't know. But the divorce and how Megan seems to be putting Slash in a certain mindset, so that relationship seems to have affected, again, this is just speculation on the outside, but you, at least knowing these people to a degree, kind of saying the same thing, that the relationships is what fixed theirs. The Slash's girlfriend fixed his real girlfriend fixed his work wife, or whatever that phrase is.
Yeah, I mean, Brandon, we all need at least one relationship that we can invest trust and ourselves into. And I'm just delighted that Slash and Megan are back together after, because Megan was Slash's girlfriend for a while in '88, and she took one look around her and said, I can't deal with this, this is too fucking crazy, and got out of it. But, thank God they eventually got back together again, because she's a wonderful person, and obviously somebody that Slash can absolutely trust and be himself with. We all need somebody in our life that we feel accepts us for being who we are.
Do you think, because of course Erin is mentioned in this as well, do you think that's something Axl was missing with him? Because, Duff's a family man, Slash is a family man. They all, even within the band, like not original members, Frank has kids. Do you think that's something that's always eluded Axl? Maybe that was something that hurt him for a while, and maybe it would stopped him from...
Undoubtedly. Obviously, Axe has got some major family issues, and I'm not going to go there because it's
I wouldn't want you to, sure. Right.
But it's not appropriate. But
Agreed.
the family issues, in some degree stem from his own family. And to my knowledge, he's never married, and to my knowledge, he's never been a father himself. Of course he's missed out on something essential in life. Whatever you think about Team Brazil, the one thing you have to acknowledge is that they provided stability and family for him.
Right.
I'm delighted that he has that from them. Are they the best managers in the world? No, I think Cliff and Peter are the best managers in the world. Bernstein and Mensch. But you have to have some sanity, and you have to have some firm ground in the foundation of your home. Otherwise, you're going to go off spinning. And all of us involved with GNR have gone off spinning at one time or another.
No, you're right. And again, that's what drew me into this band and the characters within the band, and just getting your perspective as somebody who, met them at the beginning. Well, not the beginning, but when they were making the name for themselves finally. And of course, you helped them out with that. Another question, kind of divert from something that's not as deep. Comes from Twitter. Javier, he wants to know if how many shows were professionally recorded during your tenure with the band? Any unseen Appetite or Lies gig collecting dust somewhere? Anything that, because GNR fans love our bootlegs and unreleased material. So if you know of any, we would love to know.
Well, I know Tommy Zutaut would love for the marquee shows to be mixed and mastered properly and put out. One story that, we all make big mistakes in our lives, and I'll never forget going into Geffen and being with Eddie Rosenblatt and saying, we're playing the Roxy in a couple of weeks, and it's going to be the last LA club show because then we're going out on tour with the Cult. And this may well be our last LA club gig. And would you put up $5,000 so as I can get a truck and record it? And he turned me down. And I sometimes sit there and try and extrapolate how many millions of dollars that would have generated for Geffen and Universal if they'd just come up with $5,000 at that moment. But I think the one recording that I know that Tommy would like to see the light of day properly is the stuff we recorded at the Marquee.
Anything from videos other than just shows? Because I was talking to Mitch off the air, and he had to hop off the call just for a second. But there was something, and this has been the talk amongst GNR fans. Is all the tour bus videos. Like there could be eventually a behind the scenes of GNR that may be waiting in the wings at some point to be released. Do you know anything of that?
Well, to be honest, Brandon, it's so long ago. My memory of that would be less than dependable.
That's a fair answer. That's fair.
The one thing that comes to mind is the It's So Easy video, which I think you can find online now. I mean, there's nothing hidden and nothing is private in this world anymore.
You're right.
But the It's So Easy video, I canned it because I thought it was going to have a really negative impact on acts because of some of the scenes in it. And ironically, when he went through his divorce with Erin, he tried to find the masters for it so that he could can it, and her and her lawyer couldn't get a hold of it. But, even that somehow is out there, as a rough edit. And I think what you have to assume is, in this day and age, if there was any recording device anywhere, it'll come bubbling up on the fucking internet one way or another, whether it should or not.
Yeah, just ask our president, grab her by the, who would have thought that would have came out. So,
I know.
To a much lesser extent of recording quality or whatever. These are just, there's so many questions and I can't get to them all, but I want to go back to focus more on you. And just so your post-GNR life and everything that's been going on. I want to know more about Alan Niven today. Everything that happened after GNR. You mentioned depression, whatever you're comfortable sharing. Because I will say this could be, I guess, a segue. This was another question. I think this is from my buddy Johan from Sweden. You're one of the places that you love from my GNR forum. He just wants to know how you felt when you saw the band you once managed start headlining all these shows on the stadium shows and Use Your Illusion, and you alluded to some of it before that it was depressing, and which is a understandable feeling to have.
The fracture of the relationships, the sense of betrayal, and I eventually found that every major relationship in my life at that time involved a degree of betrayal. That put me in depression. In terms of what they've done in the last year and a half, to be perfectly honest, I am absolutely thrilled for Slash. He's playing better than he's ever played in his life. He could definitely have become a rock and roll casualty at some point, especially after I was was not managing him anymore. I mean, one of the things I'm proudest of is the fact that none of them died, and that was a battle.
Yeah.
And I will give kudos to Goldstein there, because he put an awful lot of effort into that with me, and was a very significant part of keeping people alive. So I'm thrilled that Slash is out there doing that. I mean, when he turned 49, he had a bit of a meltdown because, you know, as he said, Niv, 50's coming up. And I said to him, listen, and listen to me good. If I could get one decade back to relive, it would be my 50s, because that's the best balance between wisdom, body, heart, and soul that I've ever experienced. And I said, your 50s are going to be the prime of your life. And here he is, what now, 52, and things couldn't be better.
You gave him great. You were managing him as a friend instead of just as a. So that's a great thing to say, and I'm glad that you said that. I had a fucking nervous breakdown at 24. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be in my mid-20s soon. Oh my God. So I know it's ridiculous. And
I will tell you, your 50s will be the prime of your life. And
hey, I'm not even 40 yet, so pump the brakes a little bit.
you know, you've got things to look forward to.
Good, thank you.
And I will suggest that you will probably look back on your 50s and go, they were pretty damn good. Once you hit 60, it's all over, and
fair enough.
It starts falling apart.
Well, I have time, and well, it seems like you're living the life a little bit. You're wearing the Crocodile Dundee hat wherever I see you in pictures. You're living out in Arizona, going to Coyotes games. So, I mean, I know there's a big.
Well, I went away from music
right.
for a long time, and I found it depressing to even think about, and there was a bitterness that I had within me that soured my viewpoint about being involved in anything. And I stupidly opened a bar and put a jukebox in it, so I had to live with, you know, Havana Black, Guns N' Roses, Great White, Motley Crue, Clarence Clemens, every fucking night of my life.
All your ex-girlfriends coming back.
Oh, God, what a stupid thing to do. Just nuts. But somebody in that bar looked at me one day, and they had an epiphanal moment, and they looked at me and they said, if you don't get back to being creative, if you don't start writing again or recording again or working in it again, you're just going to die, sucker. And they were right. And my vitality, what keeps me with a sense of vitality, and when people ask me how old I am, I always answer that's 27, because that's how I feel. And I feel that the spirit does not age. Your body might, but if your spirit is healthy, it doesn't age. And I've been very fortunate to find and connect with some very worthwhile talent. There's a guitar player out of Wales, England, called Chris Buck, who is just absolutely amazing. He recently got voted, and here's an albatross to live with and live down, but Total Guitar, which is one of the leading mags over in Europe, voted him best new guitar player in the world. And to have him in my life is wonderful. I made a record with a local band called Razor not so long ago, which was a pleasure to do. There are some kids around here who have genuine talent, who were working on some material. And it's very difficult in this day and age, because back in the day, you could plan a strategy. There were, say, 20 or so labels you could go to in LA and try and find a sympathetic home for a worthwhile player or artist. I mean, it's really hard to get people to notice new talent these days. But we've worked the social media and obviously gotten Chris to a certain level. But rock and roll is like malaria. It'll always be in your bloodstream. The difference is, do you have a fever or not? And I would like to say that for the last few years, I've had a mild fever and enjoyed participating in some worthwhile recordings.
And none of the fever did not include the cowbell, I assume.
No cowbell.
I'm sorry, I couldn't help it. I have Tourette's sometimes. Oh, that's wonderful. I'm glad to hear, because you sound good and you sound healthy, and what you were able to do, with GNR, with Great White, with Clarence Clemens, the great Clarence Clemens, that you have a talent and you clearly love that side. But I can understand wanting to leave it behind if you're going through like a bad breakup. I mean, you're not going to want to listen just like you tie it in with social media. If I break up with a girl, I'm not going to want to look through her Facebook or see her come through in my news feed. I don't want to see her. I want to move on. It sounds like I'm coming from a organic place. So that's fascinating. And I want to get your thought as we're waiting. I don't know if Mitch is back on the line yet. I'm waiting for him to message me that he's back. But you had said again, your philosophy, and that's what I like a lot about you, is the way you think. But there were some things that were interesting with the interview with Mitch, and that being with Axel DC.
Yeah, the Axel DC, I'm ambivalent about. The older I get, Brandon, the more I see our existence as binary. Black and white, male, female, good and bad, right and wrong. And I'm just not that comfortable that Axel will go and sing Highway to Hell, because I don't think that is really who he is, and I don't think that's really his soul and his spirit. I know why he's doing it. He's having fun, and the pressure's off. But I think Axel has still got an awful lot to offer. He's a very smart and intelligent person and a very good writer. And I would love for him to draw a line in the sand and say, I am of the light.
It's interesting, because just to refresh you, and I know my audience knows my thoughts on it, because when I first heard Axel was going to be with AC/DC, I'm like, this just doesn't make any sense. This is weird. And then I started watching the videos online, and when I got to interview Scott Ian, he was the same way. So it was interesting that he felt the same that I did. With watching the videos online, I'm like, okay, this could work. And then I went to go see them at Madison Square Garden, and it was one of the best shows I've ever seen. And actually, I didn't meet Scott Ian at that show. I saw him in the crowd with Charlie Benanti and Daryl Dixon. Walking Dead coming back tonight. You're gonna watch that. But they were in the crowd, and sorry, I got excited for a second. And Scott Ian, when I interviewed him, saying that's the best AC/DC show he's ever seen. So it's interesting, those perspectives. But with yours, I mean, because Axel, he grew up on AC/DC, grew up on Elton John, Elton and Roses. So, right. And the other thing, and I know Mitch is back on the line, that I'm just curious about, because you being a rock and roll manager, and especially in the days of GNR when they were really dangerous, but the devil imagery that you had an issue with, is that still a case? Because with AC, it's not like it's a deicide or Cannibal Corpse kind of imagery.
Oh, I know, but I've got no time for that at all.
Which is fair. That's your feelings. That's fine. I'm just curious of it. It was just surprised me.
Yeah, I mean, as I pointed out earlier, I'm old and ancient, and the back end of the hippie movement, and it's interesting when people use the word dangerous with Guns N' Roses. No band is quote-unquote dangerous. A person who is dangerous is somebody with a pump-action shotgun in their hand and intent to use it.
Unfortunately, yes, yeah.
But I've obviously heard that comment made many times before. And I have to laugh, because to me it's like, okay, so if a band is visceral and they have an intelligence as well and actually make you think about some things, that's dangerous, because that to me is GNR, an incredibly visceral band with a really smart intelligence in it. Well, if that's dangerous, guys, that's dangerous. But the thought provocation, I would hope, brings people to being, in the end, positive and of the light, and not dumbass and of the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
what did Jung say? It is better to light one candle than to curse the darkness. And to me, a great rock and roll band with a good spirit and a good heart is a lit candle.
I got it. I like that. I mean, I understand all of that thought process. And I like what GNR does or did or does when you're talking about the intelligence level. You know, that's why I do like that they are getting political a little bit online. Some more involved, like Del James or, you know, Richard Fortas makes Facebook posts. Or it can be just as simple, like as Axl just says, fuck Nunez, or, you know, says some shit about Jeff Sessions. So, I mean, they're still involved. And that's why, I mean, I like AC/DC, but they were never as intelligent of music as GNR, which is why I never I don't have an AC/DC podcast for that reason.
Well, listen. When you're talking about AC/DC, I mean, first of all, you have to distinguish. And for me, my affection for AC/DC is umbilically connected to Bon Scott, because he had a wit about him. There was a sense of humor in what he did that I found appealing. The Young Brothers on their own, I don't find very appealing.
That's fair. That's fair. And you, in this country, for now, you are allowed to have your own opinion. That's cool. Have you?
You know,
okay.
You know, one of the bands I worked with is called the Angels,
right?
Who are very much peer group of AC/DC in Australia, and the appeal to the Angels, for me, they were visceral and they were guitar driven, but they had Doc Neeson, and Doc Neeson was a wild Irish poet with a magnificent heart, and I loved him. I thought Doc Neeson was just one of the best people I ever knew. So I found the Angels far more appealing than the Young Brothers.
Fair enough. We'll wrap up here with you. I'm curious, and I mean, I can't even thank you enough for your time. Then I'm curious with...
Thank you for having the interest of having some old duffer sitting natter on.
Oh, you're not that old. I once spoke to, I didn't get to interview him, but I got to speak on the phone with Clive Davis. So, I mean, he's old, but he's still there.
Yeah.
So you're not Clive Davis or, I mean, Betty White, come on. Her and Slash are hanging out, playing with snakes all the time. You're not Betty White status yet. So you're good. You're good. And plus, I'm always picking out gray hairs for my 34-year-old beard. It's fine. Then do you foresee... I should ask, have you seen any of the new, or do you want to see any of the new Guns N' Roses shows? Is that hard? Is that, again, an ex-girlfriend in your face? Or even like in a lesser level when that live concert that they have with Bumblefoot that's on VH1 MTV on all the time, can you go back and watch GNR, whether it be post-you or current?
It's not something that I've been obliged to react to at this point. Would I buy a ticket, or if a friend of mine bought a ticket, would I go and accept it? No, I wouldn't. If, on the other hand, I got an invitation from the band and they were kind enough to send a car to pick me up and bring me home, then I would graciously accept.
All right. Well, I hope to start that bridge. I don't know why Axl detests you. You seem like a lovely man. Hopefully I'll be your Megan. I'll see what happens. I'll see if I don't know. My boobs aren't as big though.
On that one, I would say good luck.
A boy can dream. Hey, if somebody from not New Zealand / the UK can once go on to manage GNR, crazier things can happen. I know you're not on social media or anything like that, but is there?
Deliberately.
Is there? Yeah, I don't blame you. I'm only on it for radio. Is there any way for fans to, I don't know, if they want to send you questions, or, I mean, of course you can always come back on here. Invitation's always open. But maybe bands that you are excited about that you want to get out there. Is there any other way fans can connect with you aside from through Mitch Lafon like me?
Well, I never used to do interviews back in the day. And good luck trying to find photographs of me back in the day. I was very good at being invisible.
I asked that for Mitch. I said, do you have any pictures? I can't find any online. Okay.
No, my attitude was that my bands were quite capable of speaking for themselves, as was their music. In this day and age, I've mitigated it a little bit because I talk to you now. And the quid pro quo is you've let me mention Chris Buck. And that's the main reason why I do it, to point out that there is quality playing, quality music out there from my judgment. And I like to think from the judgment of a lot of other people now that it's worth checking out.
How about this? If you want, just like how Mitch is doing now, because I did interview Mitch before, and I got his story of holding his little hockey stick. If you want to bring on Chris Buck or anyone you feel that's exciting to you, and you want to co-host an episode with me, since we already did our interview, I mean, the invitation's always there. So if you ever want to co-host and you want to bring someone on, someone that we GNR fans, rock and roll fans should know about, let me know, and I'll be happy.
Well, thank you. That's very generous of you, Brandon, and I will file that in my rain check file.
I will take it. Alan, enjoy your day. I know no hockey, but do your best to enjoy your Sunday, and I hope we talk again soon. Thank you so much for this time.
We've got the Canucks at 7:55.
Oh, there you go. I have, because I'm a big, we'll bookend it with hockey talk. So I'm a big hockey attire collector. So I have my Canucks, the old one from the 94 Stanley Cup. I shouldn't say old one because their old ones were gross. But the very famous Pavel Bure jersey. But then, since I'm an Islander fan, you'll appreciate this. When Mark Messier left the Rangers, and I just wanted to stick it to my Ranger fan friends, I bought a Canucks Messier jersey.
Well, the last Dogs game I went to, I actually broke out a shirt that I'd never worn to a game before just to see. And it's actually from the Mighty Ducks movie, the Eastland jersey that a friend of mine who was in the movie wore during the shooting of the movie. And I was really surprised that a lot of people knew where it came from.
Of course. It's the Mighty Ducks. Quack, quack. Oh, you're talking like America, I mean, especially my age group. Come on. I would love to. I wonder if Emilio Estevez is a Guns N' Roses fan. I would love to have him on the show. That's interesting.
Probably.
Oh, who isn't? Who isn't? Well, some more than others.
Just don't wear a Thomas Plekanec Toronto Maple Leaf sweater, and we'll be good.
I have a Canadiens jersey. How about that? Oh,
yeah.
We'll end here. I have the red Canadiens jersey, and I'll let you go, Alan, after this. I have two Coyotes jerseys. I have, when they first came out, the black one that looks all like Aztec and shit, which is amazing. And then when they started introducing...
Love that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful jersey. And then another one, when the NHL started introducing the third alternate jerseys, when they had the green, and it was like a weird-looking coyote face on there, but it was badass. So, yeah, we have some sort of coyote connection. There you go. Keith Kachuk, Jeremy Rodnick. I can say words and names.
Yes.
There you go. So, Alan, thank you so much, and I hope we can talk again soon.
Brandon, thank you for your time, and a pleasure meeting with you, and I hope to meet you in person one day.
Absolutely. If you're ever in New York, I would love to have you in studio. That would be an amazing experience. Thank you so much, Alan.
You're welcome, gentlemen. Good to talk with you, Mitch, too, even though it was brief. Sorry, we kind of took up all the oxygen.
And I got to get going to an Udo show tonight, Udo Dirkschneider. I got to get there, so.
Pleasure, gentlemen. Have a great day.
Thanks. Thank you so
Alan.
much. Bye.
Cheers.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Mitch. And thank you to you for listening to episode 48, which I did not plan to be over 2 hours, but sometimes you got to take advantage of the situation. I also have a very special treat for you, and this is actually courtesy of Alan. After the episode, after the outro, the band Razor he was talking about, he says is probably, he wanted to give you a song that sounds most like old school GNR. So, a Razor with It's a Motherfucker. I'm sure it'll be fun for the whole family. Free music stream download after the outro. Again, this has been, will continue to be the AFD show. Please follow, subscribe on iTunes, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, all that fun stuff. Thank you. As far as the next episode is concerned, when will you see it? Well, in the words of Axl Rose concerning Chinese democracy, I don't know if soon is the word, but you'll see it.
You've been listening to the distorted minds of Appetite for Distortion. Follow the guys on Twitter at The AFD Show and on Facebook at facebook.com/The AFD Show.
Thanks to the lame-ass security, I'm going home.